talked to a lot of you. I think it's going to be 50 vendors. Is that correct, I believe? And I don't know how many food trucks are going to be here. Car show out here, if I'm not mistaken. There's going to be carriage rides, I believe, around town. If I'm not, I should have got the paper up here and looked at it. And there's going to be a dedication at 12 noon down at the new historical marker. It's actually down there where, by the Legion, along 33. Some of you have probably seen it. On one side talks about Anthony Shane, the other side talks about John Chapman, Johnny Appleseed. So that'll be at noontime. If you could come, that'd be terrific. We've got some special people that are going to be coming to help us dedicate it. One of them is coming from South Carolina. Ironically, I was talking to Mr. Frech about it. He's talked to this woman before. Her name is Kathy Jo Higgins. She's originally from Oklahoma City, and her grandpa's last name was Shane. And she is a direct descendant of Anthony Shane, so she's going to be here. And then there's somebody in, some people in Salina that may in fact be indirectly related to John Chapman, Johnny Appleseed, and we'll talk to them and see if they can make it. Mr. Frech graciously said that he would help out on that day, and I can't tell you enough about this guy. He's got, what, 3 speaking engagements this week, so he's a very busy man. So before I introduce our speakers, Brad, who is our vice president, does a terrific job with the video and all the things I really can't do. And he's done a lot of research, downloaded a lot of stuff to the computer, stuff that, well, documents, pictures, all kinds of things.
Right.
So would you like to say something to him?
Yeah.
As you can tell, we're videoing this tonight. We got a speaker here to make it a little better for the audience and hopefully the video. So we'll be posting this video if it turns out okay pretty soon. We're in the process of making another little video presentation, probably only be 5 or 6 minutes long, and we'll post that on YouTube and Facebook, and that's about a fire in 1908 that burnt down an elevator where the train sculpture is right now. And it was a pretty big fire. So we have quite a few pictures and news articles from the Standard. So that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Yep. We posted some videos, like you mentioned. We have our own, what do you want to call that, a YouTube channel?
Yeah.
So if you go to YouTube, type in Shane's Crossing Historical Society, you will see things that we produced here. So, and it's because of this gentleman right here. Like I said, I'd have absolutely no idea how to do those things. So I appreciate it. I have behind me 2 gentlemen that I can't say enough about. One of them has a student, one of them was a colleague of mine, and they're very, very special people. Their enthusiasm for history, their energy, the research they do, the interest they provide to you people, having all you here tonight, it says something about these 2 gentlemen. I mean, you come here because you want to hear something very special, and they always provide something very special. So it's indeed my pleasure and honor to introduce Mr. Minnich and Mr. Frech.
I don't know what you guys want to do with that. I have to be.
Yeah, you can just take it out of there and give it to him.
Okay. I hate these things. Okay, I really appreciate this place. I mean, you have a great facility here, and a lot of people have put a lot of work into it, and I'm impressed, that this community has this. It's something to see and something to appreciate. And the gentlemen here that are officials in this organization really have done a lot. But today I and my colleague here are going to be talking about 4 examples of charity, character, and courage from the 19th century. There are a lot of people that came through here in the 19th century that could show all these qualities. We've picked 4 hopefully outstanding examples of them. Now, we all have a pretty good idea of what courage is. We all have a pretty good idea of what charity is, character is a little more indeterminate when we look at it. But character, as I'm talking about it, as the people we're looking at here, the determination, ability to deal with difficult situations. And all four of the examples we have are people dealing with difficult situations. The first, hey, one of you guys want to handle that word right there? Because I can't do it myself, so what the heck, I don't know why I'd appreciate anybody else being able to do it. But luckily it translates into something easy enough to say. Young bird woman Shane. Young bird woman Shane is a Lenape. Lenape, what we call them usually are Delawares. Lenape is what they call themselves. And that just means the people, or how they used to add on to it, the Lenny Lenape, the special people. She was one of the Delaware. Born, we don't know the exact date of her birth. We can tell from census figures it was probably in the early 1770s. We don't know the exact date of her death, but given her health at the end of the 1830s, it must have been in the early 1840s. She was born, again, probably in Ohio. When she's being raised, she comes in contact, well, her grandmother plays a role in raising her. And her grandmother is a Moravian. What Moravians were, in the 18th century, these German and Swiss missionaries came over to the Americas to try to convert the Native Americans to their form of Christianity. And they had some luck with the Mohicans and with the Delaware. And with the converts they made, or at least some of the converts they made, they established two settlements in east central Ohio, in Tuscaroras County over there. One called Schoenbrunn for the Mohicans, one called Gannadhooten for the Delaware. And they had these communities established. They were functioning, they were successful. And then the Revolutionary War came along. And they were caught in the middle then because they were pacifists. They did not believe in fighting. They did not believe in war. And the war begins, and both sides are trying to pull them into it. The British are in Fort Detroit, up in Detroit. The Americans are at Fort Pittsburgh. And they're both trying to push this Indian group into the war on their side. And they don't want to fight. They're pacifists. The extent they do anything for anybody, they pass on intelligence to the Americans about pro-British raiding parties, pro-British Native American raiding parties heading toward Pennsylvania. But some of these raiding parties are successful. They do a lot of destruction over in Pennsylvania. And because of this, the Americans are angry and they're looking for somebody to attack. And who do they attack? Pacifists. They come to Gannadhooten. This is in 1782. They come to Gannadhooten and they massacre 96 men, women, and children. And in the aftermath of that, a lot of the surviving Moravians leave the faith. Because they thought they'd been set up. They told us to be pacifists. These people showed up and slaughtered us. But, for example, her parents leave the faith, for example. So she's seen that side. These Native Americans, Christians being attacked for being Native Americans. Then she's going to experience the other side, maybe. Early 19th century, there is a Native American movement that grows up to keep the Americans from expanding into the Ohio Valley. And it's led by these two men, they're brothers. Tecumseh. Tecumseh leads the warriors. He's the fighting guy. The religious side of the movement is taught by his brother. I keep pointing there. His brother, Tenskwatawa, the open door. He teaches a return to old beliefs. Stop your way of interacting with these Europeans and adopting their ways. Return to the old ways. Don't intermarry with these people. And Christian Indians are a threat. In 1806, he comes among the Delaware along the White River in Indiana. And he leads a witch hunt, and it's a witch hunt against Christian Indians. And they burn or tomahawk, we don't know how many, 8, 10, we don't know. How do we know that Mrs. Shane might have, there's a good chance she was there, because there are only 2 accounts of what happened there. One of the 2 extended accounts. One of those extended accounts comes from white Moravian missionaries who were in the area at the time. The other account of what happened that day comes from an interview that was done right here in Rockford of Mr. and Mrs. Shane by Benjamin Drake about Tecumseh and Tenskwatawa for their book on the subject, for his book on the subject. So the detail they go into in that interview, they must, she probably was here. But, so she's seeing again. Now, this time, you have Native Americans being attacked because they're Christians. So she's seeing the violence on both sides. By 1820, she's here. Now, she probably was in this area before Shane was, because there were Delaware out here between 1782 and 1808. There's records of them being out in the area. And she, we don't have all these details, but there's a very good chance she was at the second crossing before he was. By 1820, they're here. They're financially successful. He's operating a trading post. He's working for the government as a messenger and an interpreter and a scout. They have this large farm out across the river there where the cabin used to be. A large, very successful farm that people come by and they see and are impressed by. Well, he's not around. Delaware women were outstanding farmers. They had that reputation. So whatever was there was most likely from her, not from him. They're living there, 1820. He is the most famous man in the area. Well known. They're living there, and based on the 1820 census, they're a blended household. She comes into the marriage with one son who's in his 20s, and 2 girls, Elizabeth and Nancy, who are under 10. He comes into the marriage with a son in his 20s. They'll have one child together, Charles. When they talk about her descendants, they'd all be through Charles. But so they have, that's the group living there. When they do the 1820 census, they claim that all these people are white. Given the definition of the time, none of these people are white. She and her 3 children from the previous marriage are all pure Delaware. Anthony and his older son and his younger son are part French Canadian and part Native American. But they're all counted as white. And back then that was considered some kind of compliment, because a lot of these Indians that were very financially successful were, if you saw Jean-Baptiste Richardville, who was the richest Indian in Indiana, when you see his name in the census and his family, they're classified as white. She would not have found that a compliment though, because she was proud of being a Native American. One of the other things of the time and reflects the attitude. There are three other people living on their property. 3 other people. They're described as unnaturalized foreigners. What they are 3 other Native Americans. And they're calling them unnaturalized foreigners in this country. That's rich. But she loses another child in infancy. And she is extraordinarily depressed by this. She's despondent. She's looking for something to believe in. She tries fasting. She tries meditation. None of it works. And then she meets this man. That's Isaac McCoy, who doesn't look like the guy in the mural in town. He's supposed to be Isaac McCoy. But that's Isaac McCoy. Isaac McCoy was a Baptist missionary. He'd been sent into the area to convert people, Native Americans, to the Baptist faith. And when he becomes very close friends with the Shanes, and especially with her. And she finds that what he is telling her is a lot like what her grandmother told her when she was a little kid. And she finds that reassuring. Different churches in the area come to her and try to convert her. Because these people are rich at the time. And he is famous. He's a big hero. And it would be a feather in their cap if they got them converted to their church. She says, no. I want a church for the Indians. I want a church for the Native Americans. So they come to her then and tell her, well, how can you dress like this? Christian women wouldn't dress like that. A Christian woman wouldn't wear that jewelry. And she tells them, hey, my religion is not in what I wear. My religion is in my heart. When she finally joins a church, it is the church that Isaac McCoy establishes in Fort Wayne, where he is trying to convert Native Americans. And that church, the founding members of that church are McCoy and his staff and their families, a black man, a Potawatomi woman, and Mrs. Shane. She is one of the founding members of the first Protestant church in Fort Wayne. In 1828, they leave the area. Anthony has been offered a job as an interpreter on the Shawnee, Delaware Reservation in Kansas. And they go out there and they relocate. Out there, again, she's pushing for them to set up schools for the Native American children, to set up a mission there. That is her effort, and that's, she, along with McCoy, are able to succeed in doing that. She sends her son, Charles, to the Choctaw Academy. The Choctaw Academy was a school in Kentucky that was there to educate the elite of the tribes. And that's where her son is set. Her son, when Anthony dies in 1834, her son will become the interpreter on the Shawnee, Delaware Reservation. Her daughter, Elizabeth, will also become an interpreter. This is a map of the part of the Indian reservation territory out there. And there's, I don't know, you guys probably, if you get back any distance, you probably can't see that, but it says Shane and Wells there. That's where the Shanes and the Wells live, right by the reservation, the Indian Agency, right by where the Indian mission was established. It says Wells next to it. That was her other daughter. Her husband was Thomas Wells. But that's where she lived. By 1839, she's living there. She's gone blind. Isaac McCoy comes to see her and ends up talking about what a fine Christian woman she was. He just should have added to that she was a fine Native American Christian woman. That's the description she would have liked to have. She, you know, where she's, when she was buried, it's got to be in there. See, where that is, that's where Kansas City, Kansas is. She, well, most logically is buried in the southern suburbs of Kansas City, Kansas. These are a couple of her descendants. They don't look very much like Native Americans, but the man on the left, Ralph Smith, he passed away a few years ago. He was a Superior Court judge in Arizona. The lady that Mr. Schum was talking about a little bit ago, I think that's her daughter. Because I was in contact with her about Shane, and it's been a few years. I don't think it would have made her 68 by now. But his descendants, a person who showed all the traits above: character and charity and courage. And now my cohort will talk.
All right, good evening. Thank you guys for coming. I will not be holding this thing, so. You look like a young Madonna. So Mr. Frech approached me about a year ago, and he said, "Hey, I'm working on something, character, and us two talking about character. I think that's an oxymoron in itself, right there." But I asked my wife to come to the speech tonight, and she said no. She goes, "Why would I come listen to a boring speech?" So I'm going to try to keep it lively. I get the privilege of working with Mr. Frech, and I thank him for all the research that he has done, and he's helped me do as well. So stark differences between him and I: one, he's much better looking, and two, you see a paper in my hand. You didn't see a single paper in his hand. So the facts that he has, he rolls with. So everybody's going to enjoy tonight, but I'm the most terrified person, because if I make a mistake, he's going to know it. So I get to talk about Phebe Riley. Phebe Riley was born in 1777. She's going to pass away in 1873. Next slide is going to be a picture of Captain James Riley and his wife Phebe. Okay. These two have 5 children together. She's a mother of 5. They live in Middletown, Connecticut. And you have to understand that it's an old established town. I would say amenities, stores, places, things you could buy. Many of the men in her community were sailors, so they're gone out to sea for months, if not years at a time. So when she was gone, she was the head of the household, so she has to take care of the finances. She has to take care of rearing the children while he's out at sea trying to make some money. So when Captain James Riley's ship, the Commerce, wrecked, okay, in 1815 off the coast of North Africa, James and his crew became enslaved by the indigenous people there. Now, this isn't to talk about Captain James Riley, but her life gets interwoven when he comes back. When he returns back to America, he's like, "I want a different change of pace. I want to do something different." He says, "Are you coming with me?" And she says, "Let's go." And I asked my wife to come to a speech. Take a look around, she's not here. So James must have been a heck of a lot more convincing than I was. To pick up, where are we going? Well, we're going to the wilderness. We're going to the edge of than the frontier. And, you know, I don't know, she's a courageous woman. You got to have character just to say, okay, let's go. You know, the area that she's traveling through is full of, you know, bears. It's full of snakes. It's full of cougars, wolves. Native Americans are still around, friendly or hostile. So she's going to deal with all this. Just really speaks to her character. When they were traveling on the old national road, and there's a situation where they're bumped into some ruffians. These people had literally chopped down a tree to block the road and to extort them to pay them money to get the tree. Well, here comes big Captain James Ryan, who was a big man. And through his stature, his intimidation, they cleared off the road. So I don't know what James said, but he was pretty big dude. So Phebe was lucky that she had him there to get the road workers and get them to clear the blockage. The route that they took, the road at the time ended in Wheeling, okay? So they had to take a roundabout way to make it to their new home, traveling to Lancaster, then to Chillicothe, and where they wintered in Chillicothe in 1821. So again, far away from home, strange place, you're not even to your destination yet. It's now too cold to travel. Then they make their way from there to Springfield, and they kind of cut up from Chillicothe, and they're going to head up through Springfield. As they're traveling, Springfield to Troy, Troy to Piqua, Piqua to St. Mary's, and it was a long, hard, tedious trip over rough country. Once they reach St. Mary's, they're now traveling on Harmer's Trace through Shane's Crossing. As they traveled the last leg of the trip, a blinding snowstorm came, and luckily they had Anthony Shane's son, Secaur, as their guide, and he was able to get them to navigate through the snowstorm, where they had a cabin already built waiting for them. Now, you go from Connecticut to now you're in the middle of the frontier and you're living in this cabin. The first night there, okay, you're no longer in Kansas. The first night, a pack of wolves surrounded the house, and it was howling all night long. And there she is with her 5 children. She had to have been terrified. Me being the parent I am, I probably would have sacrificed one of my children just to let the wolves go away. Just saying, Taylor. But anyhow, I mean, it speaks to her character when I read about this one particular case, because to be thrown out in the wilderness and to have wolves howling outside, I know I would be terrified. So the way she handled that. So the cabin in the previous was built around the Devil's Race Ground on the St. Mary's River. So now they have to clear the land. Now they have to establish, we got a farm, we got to clear the land. Phoebe's out there and she's cutting down trees with James. She's not staying at home and baking pie. She's out there. And in fact, he's going to leave to be a surveyor, and a lot of this work gets done by her. So it's just a testament to how strong she was. When he was surveying and when he was at the state legislature, she was basically, again, head of the household, taking on tasks like this. The Rileys were very friendly with the Native Americans, and Phebe is going to be one that the Native Americans are going to bring their children to, and she's going to basically perform medicine on these Native American children. So I don't know, the parents in the room, you just don't hand your children off. I know the wolf comment, but you just don't give somebody your child to look after unless you have trust and you have faith in that person. But Mrs. Riley would perform and treat the children, the Native Americans. So it just shows that she complimented James as well, because they're both friendly with the natives. The first thing that they did was they built a mill. In the mill, using the water to run a mill to ground down corn, buckwheat, and cut boards. He had customers from a mile around coming to him to get this work done. To supply the power, they need to dam up the river. By damming up the river, you're also cutting off travel routes. So what they did is they actually dug kind of a spur around, if you will, so that the boats could maneuver around. Next picture is a picture of a keel boat. Boats like this would traverse the St. Mary's River. So reading about these original accounts, I've spent a lot of time in my childhood fishing the St. Mary's River, and it's nothing like what it used to be. So, I mean, I would not swim in the St. Mary's River, but they used it for navigation. They used boats like this. One day in particular, sometimes the boats needed help traveling the channel, which was Riley's men would take oxen and help traverse the boats around. But one day, a captain, an unprincipled villain with two pirogues lashed together, arrived at the channel. The mill workers were gone to get a bite to eat, and the captain ordered his crew to destroy the dam. James was gone, serving in the state legislature, so Phebe came and asked the captain to stop. He refused. She went home, she loaded 2 guns, 2 large bore guns, 2 squirrel guns. She armed 2 of her sons and got 2 local Quakers, okay? And another man armed with 6 guns drove off the would-be vandals. That's pretty impressive. You can convince a Quaker to go into battle. So I think Phebe, when she spoke, people listened. So you have to understand Quakers are pacifist, and yeah, but if she's barking, I'd be running. So she was able to drive him off. Later, the Rileys would return east, and James, his calling was back to the sea. He missed it, so he left. While he was at sea on one of his trips in 1840, he would become sick, and then he died. Phebe will live to 1873. She'll die in Urbana, Ohio, at age 93. A woman who left civilization to brave the frontier for her husband and her family. Her son, James Watson Riley, founded Salina and Van Wert. So that's Phebe Riley. Now, I'll turn it back over to him so Mr. Frech can talk about the cholera epidemic.
Talking now about the citizens of Wilshire. And this is what happened there and how the people reacted for 9 days in July 19th through July 28th, 1854. During that time, somewhere between a fourth or a third to a third of the people in that town will die from cholera. And what we see the rest do is what this is about. Now, what do we know about that? There were newspaper stories at the time about what happened in Wilshire. These are from the Fort Wayne Times, and they're from the Western Standard, which is today the Daily Standard in Salina. About that, the main source for these, the story, is an account that was written afterward by Dr. John Pierce, who was a doctor handling the epidemic. He wrote it in 1881. It was published in 1882 in Sutton's History of Van Wert and Mercer County. You can also find it in the Historical Collection of Ohio by Henry Howe. In 1832, cholera came to America. It started originally in India. It spread across Asia and into Europe, And then in 1832, it comes to America. Now, cholera is a disease that's caused, or spread, I shouldn't say it's caused by cholera bacilli, but it's spread by drinking contaminated water, or eating off utensils or plates worse than that contaminated water. And what that water is contaminated by is human feces. That's how that disease, that's how it's transmitted. It shows up in human feces. With the disease, once you get it, you have extreme headaches, nausea, stomach pain, joint pain, dehydration. You die. You can die within a matter of a few hours. You can die in a period of 3 or 4 days, either peacefully or in extreme pain, or you can survive. Not everybody that gets this disease dies. But the problem is, and we've seen this here, at the time, you've got to understand, this is the basis for this whole thing. You've got to understand that at the time, nobody knew for sure how this was spread. We had a little dose of this back during COVID, where we didn't exactly know how it was being spread, and all kinds of reaction was based on that. Well, then it's worse. They have absolutely no idea about it, about where it comes from or how it's, how you get it, anything. There are popular theories. One is the moral theory. Cholera is God's punishment. And when they look at Wilshire, what they see, what is God punishing at Wilshire at the time? Well, people are not keeping the Sabbath. They are hunting and fishing on the Sabbath. They're doing household chores on the Sabbath. They're violating the Sabbath. And there are 6 people selling liquor in town. There's 6 people selling whiskey, and for the size of that town, there's a lot of people selling whiskey. But, because Wilshire was only a third as big back then as it is today, but there was this evil whiskey sellers. There is something of a scientific explanation. Some scientists say it's miasma. Miasma means bad air. And one theory out there is that it's polluted air, basically from rotting human waste and rotting matter, rotting vegetable matter. But again, people don't know for sure. There are all kinds of cures back then, almost none of them work. And some of them just don't do anything, and some of them just make you worse. This is one back then. In New York, they were telling people the way to prevent or control cholera is not to drink water, cold water. That's a great advice for people that one of the main ways it kills you is by dehydration. A favorite cure-all, calomel. Well, unless you're very close there, you probably can't see this, but you can see one of the major ingredients in calomel is mercury. You want to put a lot of mercury into your system? That'll do wonders for you. But in 1854 in Wilshire, there had been a very, very cold winter. There was, following that very cold winter, there was a lot of rain and flooding. And after that, there was a drought. The rivers slowed down flowing. The river. July 19th, 1854, it begins. People start dying in Wilshire. And again, they do not know how this is spread, what the cause is. No. People are dying. A lot of people are dying. The two local doctors, Dr. John Pierce, Dr. C.L. Melsheimer, are riding the circuit, trying to do whatever they can to cure people. But again, most of what they can do is not going to do anything good. You know, they're trying. In fact, Dr. Pierce, while he's out trying to fight the disease, his wife dies from cholera. Back in town, you've got all these bodies piling up. You got to get them in the ground. And 3 local men volunteered to act as a burial detail. Ira Blossom, R. McManus, and Mill Major. These you guys, you know, again, you don't know how the heck this thing is killing people. And they're going out and they're getting these bodies and putting them in the ground. In one case, there is this one family, the Harker family. Everybody, all 5 people in that family die. People say, okay, just burn the house down. Burn it down. Instead, these guys say, these people deserve a Christian burial. They go into that house to get the bodies out. Now, we know now that that wasn't going to be a particular threat, but then, you telling me you want to go into that house where everybody in it has died? But they do. Then they burn the house down after they bury the people. Around the community, different people, they're advised to leave town, and that's what most people do. They abandon the town. But you've got all these sick people back there that need taken care of. There are a couple of examples of people who basically abandon family members. There's one case where a sister abandons a brother to die. But many other people step forward. The whiskey sellers. The whiskey sellers in town, like Henry Reichard, turn over their supplies, and this just isn't liquor. These guys are the merchants in town. They turn over their supplies to help feed these sick people. Other people take them into their home. A guy named William Ainsworth takes 6 of these people into his home, and what does he see? He sees his daughter die. And he's got to think, did I bring these people into our home that caused my own daughter to die? In other cases, old widow Dutcher, one of the whiskey sellers, takes several people into her home to take care of. And the people in town allow her to come into any home they want to get supplies to make these people live. And it's all, 6 of these people are going to die. But she is there and she is trying to save lives. And again, you see all these people putting themselves forward at that time. Now, what happened on July 28th, there was a big rainstorm. The people at the time thought, well, and the epidemic ends. The people at the time thought it was the air, that had cleared the air out. What it actually cleared out was the river. It got the river moving, and so they didn't have to drink that polluted water anymore. One of the ironies of the whole situation is, this is 1854. In 1854, so even today, there are cholera epidemics. Every year, 100,000 people in this world die in cholera. Wasn't that many years ago, down in Haiti, there had been an earthquake, and in the aftermath of the earthquake, 10,000 people down there got cholera and died. So it's still around. But in London in 1854, a cholera epidemic, and a doctor, John Snow, notices that people who drink from one particular well, or not from one particular pump, those people get cholera. And he makes that association between polluted water. And that word takes a long time to get out. It's several years later before they find out about the bacteria in the water being the cause. But that's the beginning of people knowing about it. This is the grave of Dr. John Pierce. It's in Wilshire, in the cemetery there. Actually, right over that row of trees that kind of divides the cemetery is, it's right there. He has two gravestones, one a regular gravestone, and this is one they give to people who fought in the Civil War. And in the Civil War, he had been an assistant surgeon for the 51st Indiana. And one of the things about it, see, the 51st Indiana was a regiment that was raised from the center part of Indiana. I noticed he did not there were companies raised right around here in Van Wert County, in Adams County, in Jay County, in Mercer County. There were companies raised here. He didn't take one of those companies. And I always wondered if it was because he didn't want to go through that anymore of treating a lot of people that he knows and seeing a lot of people he knew die. That's why he took this company over in Indiana. That he didn't know these guys beforehand. But a lot of people put themselves out and showed charity, character, and courage fighting the Wilshire cholera epidemic. Mr. Minnich.
Sir.
Again.
So I'm glad Mr. Frech used that story there at the end, because you have to wonder, as I look out in the crowd and I see a lot of people who donate their time and they give their all, and you're there for people when they're having the worst day, the darkest day, and your heart breaks for them. Mr. Van Tilburg, how many thousands of kids did you know their story, long before, so I just thank everybody in here who does have character, and to the young men and women who are growing up, following those footsteps, okay? This one brings down the house. I met with him last Thursday, and we talked for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I said, okay, I can't wait for this one. And he had me hook, line, and sinker. He goes, well, I was thinking about cutting this portion out of it just for, the length of it. I'm like, oh. Like literally my balloon deflated that I thought I wasn't going to be able to talk about Elias Secaur. This one's really special to me. Elias Secaur, born 1851, he's going to die in 1907. The case that we're going to be studying about is Mary Arabella Secaur, 13-year-old girl, beaten, raped, murdered, left for dead. I always go down, hang on a second. So before I start talking about Mary Secaur, she's buried in a grave right next to my house, and I always go down and I talk to Mary, and I do, and I just said, Mary, look, we're going to be talking about you, and I take on the case every year, trying to find one clue. Maybe we've overlooked something to find out exactly what happened. But Mary Secaur, 13 years old. Mary is one of 6 children of Joseph and Susanna Secaur. She had a twin brother, Marion. They were born in 1859, the same year of their mother's death. She would die of smallpox. Subsequently, Joseph, the father, left his children, and the children were spread around in the community. Other people took them in as foster kids, and Joseph basically goes down south and starts a new life. I think his original intentions was to send for the kids later on when he got established, but he never came back. He never came and got the kids. So just remember the wolves, okay? John, the oldest brother of Mary and Elias, is going to die serving in the Civil War. Elias and Calvin were with the Robinson family in Black Creek Township. Marion may also have been staying in the township. I read something last year, I think he was in Dublin Township more than Black Creek Township. But Mary, she's going to live with the Sidderly family, John and Sarah Sidderly. Here's a picture of Mary's grave. They have updated it on the 150th anniversary of her death, June 23rd. I went to the grave and I had some Amish friends, and we did a hayride that night, and I took them through the steps of the case. And when I got to the cemetery, Mary Secaur's headstone was gone. So I did what any responsible citizen would do. I called 911. And I talked to Mercer County Sheriff Dispatch, and I said, Mary Secaur's grave and her headstone is gone. And the woman goes, "Who's Mary Secaur?" And I'm like, "Ma'am, please, you don't know Mary Secaur." So I gave her the history lesson. Long story short, the family actually took and redid the headstone. So this has been added. This is not the original. Okay, as you can tell, I'm very passionate when it comes to Mary Secaur. The day in question, on June 23rd, 1872, while walking home from church, she was walking home with her grandpa, Strauss May. Strauss lived a mile away from John and Sarah Sitterly's house. So he stops, says goodbye to Mary, and watches her walk west. Watches until she crested the road. She's now within a half mile of her foster parents' place. She never makes it home. So give me a second, a little latitude here. The next day, John went to Strauss May's house and said, "Where's Mary?" And Strauss' grandpa says, "What do you mean, where's Mary? She went home right after church." Well, she never made it. He thought she stayed with him, which she often did. So about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they find her body. Now, Mr. Frech will do other speeches, and I will focus sometime on Mary Secaur, but it's not about Mary. It's about her brother. So here's a couple maps of the places here. How far will this go? So you see Erastus Durbin Road and the X up there, that's going to be the lynching site. Liberty Chapel Cemetery, that's Tama Road. Everything is done within 3 miles of the church, okay? There's Strauss May's place right before Burville Road. The murder site's at the Chat Picnic Woods. So when you guys go out to play, the band kids go out to play, Mary's body was found 75 yards just on the north side of the road. And then John and Sarah Sitterly's place was down by Wabash. I remember that house being there as a kid. So some of you from the area, do you remember that white house? That was John and Sarah Sitterly's place. So anyhow, back to this. Now we have a picture of Jacob and Absalom Kimmel. Jacob is going to be on the left, Absalom's going to be on the right. In all the documentation that I've read, they talk about Absalom being this unkept, awkward, very low of intelligence with sallow eyes. The kid is probably, they didn't diagnose it back then, but he is mentally challenged to whatever capacity. He's cognitively delayed. You can tell in the picture, the artist made a great deal to make Jacob look better than Absalom. After a couple of false starts, local Sheriff Thornton Spriggs and his deputies are going to go to Fort Wayne, Indiana and arrest Alexander McLeod, a tin peddler who was in the area that weekend. And then they come back and they're going to arrest brothers Jacob and Absalom. Jacob's 18 and Absalom's going to be 19 years old. Now, this starts a spark of events. We have a dead 13-year-old girl. People are very fired up. In the 1870s in Salina, people started to have raw emotions, and these emotions are going to spill out. So the boys are going to be taken to a 3-panel court, and the judges are going to hear the case. It's not the case to determine if they're guilty or not. They're reviewing all the evidence to see if there's enough evidence to take them to a grand jury when the circuit court comes around in November. That's all this case is about right now. Is there enough evidence? People are fired up from the nature of the crime. People started behaving badly. The newspaper accounts stirred emotions and convicted the accused before they were ever brought into the court. The sheriff and his deputies intimidated witnesses. Highly questionable confession was taken from Absalom. And in his confession, he's using words. If he is of cognitive low ability, if he is cognitively delayed, who's actually writing these words? And I think it was a false confession. I think it was forced, it was coerced out of him. At the hearing for the defendants to see if there was enough evidence to support the charge, the crowd made comments in court, and they're just losing all sorts of any type of civility here. The defense attorneys are asking questions of the witnesses. They take a break for the July 4th holiday, and Mercer County people do what they do best. They all start drinking, they all start talking, and they get this plan together on July 8th. The sheriff and the deputies at the jail are going to be undermanned to prevent the next chain of events. 200 vigilantes go up to the jail. Thornton Spriggs comes out, gives a diplomatic speech, let the courts have their say, let them have their time, no dice. They took a small man and pitched him into an open window. He went and unlocked the doors. They went in there, they got them then out. I really think, after doing all this research, I think the sheriff went, here's the keys. I did my best. 2,000 people are now going to join this lynch mob. Now, I asked a question. This is a tough question on one evening. How many of you in here would go and watch a lynching? Okay. I would. But I'll tell you what I won't do is walk 15 miles to go watch it, okay? These shoes ain't made for walking 15 miles, but 2,000 people so enraged left Salina, walked all the way out as the boys were put into a wagon and taken out to the murder site. People along the way had little water stations set up so people would get a drink of water. They get to the lynching site. Now, it is going to be John Frederick Shadd who's going to show up and say, what are you guys doing? This is my property. What are you doing? We're going to lynch these 3 boys. John Frederick Shadd said, I don't care what you do, but you're not going to lynch these boys on my property. I already got the blood of a dead 13-year-old girl. Take your party elsewhere. They said, okay. So they pick up their party and they head to Henry Kimmel's house. Oh, Henry Kimmel sees the mob coming. Henry Kimmel, like a coward, talk about character, he didn't have any. He took off running for the woods. He thought he was going to be lynched next. Okay, he took off running. He left his wife with 7 babies clinging to her as they set the makeshift gallows up in front of their picture glass window. And across the road, visible, they could see everything going down. So here's a picture of, a lynch mob, and Mr. Frech and I were talking about this. A couple of them are smiling. So it's kind of weird. But there's a picture, not a picture of this, but a picture of a lynching. You could have found one with 2 guys dangling. So just draw a little stick figure up there. And I appreciate right now just all the work that he went into putting this together. So, finally, a young man's going to come to the site, and it's going to be Elias Secaur, the older brother of the girl. He came not bent on revenge, but to save a life. He went before the bloody, thirsty mob and pleaded against mob action. He was able to persuade them to send back the youngest of the 3 Kimmel boys. Send him back to jail to wait for a trial. I have a book I'd like to read an excerpt from it. This is Dr. David Kimmel's book, and he got all of his information from the day diary.